Please welcome developer advocate, Julia Ferraioli. Please welcome developer advocate, Timothy Jordan.
Hello, how's everyone? Good? Got lunch in us. We're almost through the day. We're going to be speaking about the Google Plus APIs. So if you're here for that talk, you're in the right place. And if you're not, I hope you stay anyway, because we're really fun. I am Timothy Jordan. I'm a developer advocate on Google Plus.
And I'm Julia Ferraioli. I am also a developer advocate on Google Plus.
Now there's a hashtag for this session. It's GDD11JP. And we'll just take a couple moments, if we could, before we begin, to show you how you can use this hashtag in a really cool way on Google+. Does that sound nice? Good. So when we go in here into Google+, you'll notice up at the top, there's a search field. If you put in the hashtag for GDD11JP, you'll get a list of all the public posts, the recent public posts, with that hashtag. And you can see it right here. In fact, you can click on this hashtag as well. This is cool, right? Because you get all the search results with this hashtag right away. But you can also save this search for later with this button right here, which is great if you want to keep checking in on this hashtag throughout the day. It's great for conferences. It's great for interests that you might have. It will load up on your left-hand side navigation bar right here, and you can click on it at any time that you're in Google+ and get the latest posts with that hashtag. And you'll notice I've done this with other interests of mine too, so that I can check in on the latest cool roller derby posts or Google posts or theater posts. All right, so this is our agenda. We're going to be talking about Google+, the Google+ platform, public data APIs, and of course, we'll take your questions and give you some great answers at our office hours right after the session, just outside by the little yellow chairs. So first off, let's talk about Google+. I want to go through a couple slides. Now, if you were at my +1 button session, this is the same thing, right? But if you were at Brad's session earlier today, he also talked about this. I want to emphasize another angle or two here that are really important to me about the product, and hopefully that will sort of like broaden our view of what Google+ is really about. And at the core of Google+ is circles. Now, this is really important. It's particularly important to me personally, because I found myself before Google+ sharing less and less, because I could only share with the whole world these 800 or 900 friends of mine, right, that were really classmates, family, colleagues, people I met in Japan, right, all these people in one group, or none at all. And I want to share with just my family or just my friends, and I want to sometimes in the evening after work just see what my family's up to. I couldn't do that, so I stopped sharing online. I was sharing less and less. But when we came out with Google+, I had that option. I have a family circle, and I can publish photos just to my family and see what just my family's doing. I can also, during the workday, see what just my favorite API developers out there are doing. What's the cool stuff they're doing with the Google+ API, and check in on just that. Circles has given me the ability to share how I want, and that's core to the Google+ experience. The second thing that I want to mention is Hangouts. Oops, one too far. Hangouts, it's true, Hangouts is a multi-user video chat in high definition, free and easy to use. But Hangouts is so much more. And I think it's key how you start a Hangout. It's very similar to going to one of your favorite cafes and having your friends just come in and join you when they walk by. Hangouts, you tell Hangouts what circles you want it shared with, and then the stream for those people, it just shows up. And they can join if they want. They can join for a few minutes, or they can hang out all night with you. Mobile. Mobile is also very important, because your life doesn't just happen at the end of the day when you're in front of your computer. It happens throughout the day wherever you are. And we all have these really cool smartphone devices, yeah? We wanted to create an experience on these devices that really allowed you to share how you wanted, when you wanted, as easy as possible. My favorite feature on here is instant upload. Every time I take a photo, it automatically uploads it to a secure album in the cloud. When I go to share on my phone, I don't have to upload the photo. I just choose it, and it's already in the cloud, and it just shares. I can get back to my life. Or at the end of the day, when I'm sitting in front of my computer, I see the photos that were added throughout the day as I took them, and I can choose to share them then when I have more time. Right? These kinds of features really allow you to use Google+, to share on Google+, the way you share in real life, removing this artifice of the internet and the to-field and email and like web addresses, all this stuff, and just making it more like how you live your life. And that's really the last feature, right? It's you. Google+ is about focusing on you and solving problems for you and adding you across all of our products. And Larry Page recently said, last quarter we launched the Plus, and this quarter we launched the Google. Putting Google+ across Google services. And this talk is about how you can do the same with your website. Putting people first on your website, allowing people to share how they want from your website, and bringing their identity into your website. So let's get started. I want to go over the platform, and then we're going to look at a survey of the different endpoints available, and then Julia is going to dive in deep with how to actually do some cool stuff with the public data APIs. So the platform consists of 3 components, the first of which is the +1 button. It all starts with the +1 button. This is easy to use. It's just a snippet of code. You put it on your website, and you're off and running. You have the ability for your users to express affinity for your web pages, right? They get to +1 your web pages. And you're also allowing them to share to Google+ with their circles and with a rich snippet that allows them to start a rich conversation and potentially get more traffic back to your site. The second thing is the public data APIs, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this session. These allow you to get more information about your user and bring that into their experience on your website or your application. And then finally, the Hangouts APIs. If you had an opportunity to go to Wolf's excellent session on this, you learned all about adding to the rich experience of Hangouts with your own gadgets. Putting your own small web page with shared state, it could be a game or an activity that these users get to do in the Hangout. Put all 3 of these things together and you get the platform as it is today. But remember, these are just the first few steps. We've only just started with Google+. We've only just started with the APIs, right? This will grow and build as you build things on it and as you ask for more from us. So let's dive into the API. Now, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and then Julia is going to go into them in a little bit more depth. I'd like to talk about the different endpoints that are available and the API in general. It is a RESTful API with a JSON response. Now, that means that we use HTTP verbs. We put a URL in the browser, and that's like a method call, putting parameters right there in the URL. What we get back is JavaScript object notation, which, I mean, any language you're writing in, you're going to have good libraries for parsing that. And then activity streams is important to note. It is an open standard that we use in the response type, or in the response format. And we have client libraries for major programming languages, including Java, Python, Ruby, PHP, .NET, Objective-C, and Google Web Toolkit. We also have an OAuth 2 endpoint available. It's the plus.me scope. And with this, you can get the user's identity. You can use that identity to get information on their profile. And then all of these endpoints are, they require an API key. And Julia will walk you through actually getting that API key and using it with the API. So, what are the endpoints available? This is them. We have 3 categories: people, activities, and comments. And in people, we have a get. We can list people that are involved in a certain activity. For activities, we can list all of the posts of a certain user or get any particular one, and the same with comments. Let's look at those both as they look in the product and in the response type you get back from the API. So this is my profile, and you can see this is my About section. Now I'd like to be able to get this information, and that is what's available on the people.get endpoint. So what you can see is I put the shortened endpoint up here, and then on the next page, I've expanded it. We actually use this URL, and then off of that, a /+/v1, and then the actual method and parameters come after that. In this case, the method is people, and if I put in a user ID, I'll actually get the JSON response for that particular user. The ID you can see is right up here, and if you also go to my profile in the product, you'll see the ID in the URL. So you can test this just by grabbing your own ID and putting it into this URL or into our API Explorer in the documentation. Also available is list people by activity. So you can see this is actually on the activities method with an activity ID, but then we add the people method and a particular collection. So if we put in an activity ID for this post, which I posted upon arrival in Tokyo almost a week ago, and then for collection we put +1ers, then I will get all the people that have +1'd this post. I can put in resharers, and I get all the people that have reshared this post. I get a list of them, and I can then pull out those IDs and get those people specifically. And that's what this looks like right here. Right? This is the example output. You can see it's a list of people. So next up is activities. And this is the public collection of activities for a certain user ID. So I put in people and the user ID. I want the activities of that particular person and the collection public. Right, these are the public data APIs, which means we can only get public data. So this is, of course, the only collection of activities available to us. So I just went ahead and put in public. So if I want to get this list, I put in that endpoint with my user ID, and you can see I get an items list of discrete activities. In here is this ID. Now this ID, I can plug into the endpoint for a get activity and get that specific activity. This is the endpoint up here. You just /activities and then the ID. Once I plug that in, I'll get that JSON response, and you can see that I get that activity. Now remember, I mentioned that this was in activity streams format. Activity streams is very simple. It just specifies 3 required elements: an actor, a verb, and an object. The actor is the identity of the person who created this activity. In this case, it's me, right? I made this post. The verb is the type of activity. In this case, it's a check-in. That check-in means that I just pulled out my mobile phone when I was, looking at that cool, famous street crossing, and I checked into that location, and I added some text. The object is a note, and then under the object is the actual content of that post. So if we want to get comments, it's very similar. First off, we can get the list of comments. Much like the list of activities is going to give us several comments, and then we can plug that ID in to get a specific comment. So I've blurred that out so that the people that aren't Googlers, I'm not showing their name to everybody, but that's just a list of comments on the post. And you can see again here, /activities, the activity ID, /comments will get us an items list of comments. If I take this ID and I plug it in, I'm sorry, before I mention that, the list of comments also is an activity stream, so it's an actor, verb, and object. And then when I plug this into an actual /comments with the comment ID, I get a specific comment. And again, this is in activity streams format with actor, verb, and object. All right, the last 2 endpoints are for searching. Searching is very easy. You essentially use the same endpoint, but you add a query. So for people, it's /people, and then this question mark, and we add our key value get parameter pairs, query equals, and then the search terms. So to get the list of Timothy Jordans in the world, all I did was added query equals Timothy plus Jordan, and of course I get a list of Timothy Jordans. Included in there, remember, is this ID. That ID will allow me to get this specific Timothy Jordan using the people get endpoint. This is very straightforward, right? The last one is searching on activities. So if I want to do a search like GDD11JP and get the list of activities that include that, then, oh, I don't have the JSON for that. Then all I need to do is plug in question mark query equals and then that URL encoded. Yeah, so it's not going to be hash. It's like %23, I think. And we'll get the JSON response for this. Really straightforward and simple, right? These are RESTful endpoints. You just put in the URL and both the endpoint and the parameters, and you get back a JSON response. And you can do this in the browser very simply and easily. But of course, you're going to want to do some cool things with OAuth and with applications and client libraries, and Julia is going to talk to you about all of that.
Thank you, Timothy. So we're going to cover a few things in this particular session, including some example applications that have been built with the Google+ API. We're also going to look at one that I wrote for this particular session, as well as how to actually get started. So I'm actually going to break out of this presentation and go directly into these examples. Okay. So I'm just going to pull up my browser here. And the first example I'm going to show is actually a Chrome experiment. It's called G+ Globe. And what this does is maps locations from a person's public profile. So let's switch over to a profile and see what I'm talking about. In your profile, you can choose to list publicly the places that you've lived, and it plots them on the map. You can retrieve this information and use that to plot on this WebGL globe. This particular sample actually takes you through some OAuth flow, so let's try that out. I'm going to click Add my Google+ profile here, and you can see that it's requesting permission to access my information. So what this is saying is it's essentially asking for access to my user ID. I'm going to click Allow. And then the application will actually fetch those places that I've lived and plot them on the map, hopefully soon. So here we go. Success, my profile has been added, and I can see that I am now one of these many dots on this WebGL globe. Now, the OAuth flow essentially says, okay, instead of specifying a user ID, when I use one of those people.get endpoints that Timothy had mentioned, I can instead say, I want me. And that will return the data of the currently logged in user. So instead of inputting the user ID, as you saw before, you can say me. So this is pretty cool. It's a nice little application that only uses one small part of the public data API. Another one that actually also has a geolocation twist to it is called starboardsky.com. And this retrieves activities, check-ins, that people had made public on their profile and jumps to them on Google Earth. So I'm not going to leave this up for too long, but you can get the idea. And it's actually a very neat application that also utilizes just those check-in activities. Okay. Maybe we'll see somebody up here who is in this room. So the application that I've written for this particular session is a simple search on a hashtag. So I'm just going to reload this page so we can get up-to-date information on public activities that use the GDD11JP hashtag. And we can see that I can pull out who made the post, their profile pictures, the content of the post, as well as I can actually link to the post itself. So if I want to see this particular one, I click on the link, and there we go. So how hard is it to make this particular application? We don't have a very complicated user interface here. I confess I don't use any CSS. It's just plain HTML. So the first thing I want to call attention to is the fact that this is an App Engine Python project. And right here are all the files that make this particular app run. So we use the API client from the client libraries that Timothy had mentioned before. This is something you don't have to write. It takes care of discovering the API from the web and configuring the client for use, as well as these G flags, the HTTP lib libraries, and the URI template. These are all files that I've taken directly from that client library. This main.py file is the only one that I had to configure for this app. So the first thing I want to call your attention to is when we actually configure the client for use. And that's when we build this service. Now, you notice when I loaded the app, it didn't kick off an OAuth flow authorization. So we are just using the API key to authenticate with the Google Plus API. So in this case, here's my developer key, and I'm just pulling it out of a settings file. And this will give us the service that we can go ahead and call. The entire bulk of the API call is right here, where I hit the activities search endpoint with some information. I only want the 10 best results that match the GDD11JP query. I go ahead and execute that, and I've got my activities. And here I'm simply writing out some information about the activities that I found, including the profile image, as well as the display name, and what kind of object type it is. As you saw, then I wrote out the content, as well as a link to the original post on Google+. And this is really to illustrate how easy it is to write an app that calls the Google+ API. It really is this simple. You can do it in 20 minutes. I would hope that you spend a little bit more time on that to make a very polished app. Maybe one that incorporates a couple more APIs than I did. But it's really quite powerful. So what do you have to do to get going and actually start writing your app? Well, the first thing you're going to do is go into the API's console. I'm just going to reload this to make sure my session is fresh. If you've never created a Google project before, you'll see a slightly different screen than this. You'll see a prompt to create your first project, but from there, the flow will be pretty similar. I'm just going to create a project for this particular GDD. And it's going to take me to the services section where it prompts me to turn them on. So as you can see, there are a few services that you can activate for your project. We care in this session about the Google Plus API, and I'm just going to turn it on. If you've never used the Google Plus API before, this is the point at which you'll be prompted to accept the terms of service. I recommend that you read it, and after you accept those terms of service, you will be able to use the Google Plus API with your developer key. If you want to collaborate on a project, you can add your teammates right here. And then we go to how you actually authenticate. Already created for this project is my API key. Copy this down, store it in your own settings file, and this is the API key for this particular project. So do not use the API key across different projects. This is a per application identifier. If you do want to incorporate OAuth into your application, go ahead and create your OAuth client ID. I'm going to skip over that particular part for this because the flow differs if you're creating a web app versus a desktop app. So the other important thing to note is our quota for this particular API. So as you can see, we have a courtesy limit of 1,000 queries per day. This is by no means designed to be an upper bound on how often you can call the API. Obviously, if you have a large user base, you're going to hit that limit fairly quickly. And we hope that you do hit the limit, because that means your application is getting lots of use. So if you do find yourself hitting the 1,000 queries per day limit, simply go ahead and click the link to request more. And this will take you to a form to fill out that will go into a queue to be processed. A few things are already pre-populated for you, but you'll want to fill out the 3 fields that are still blank, including the app landing page or demo URL. And I just want to talk a little bit about what we want to see in your URL. The first thing we want to see is a privacy policy. This is required by the terms of use that you accept before using the API. And this is a simple informational to your user that tells them how you use the data that you receive from the Google Plus API. Are you retrieving it and never storing it? Or do you keep it in your database for a certain amount of time? The idea here is to really be transparent. The fun part is the actual demo of your project. We, as developer advocates, really love to see the apps that you build on top of our APIs. So we do want to see the app that uses the API. This allows us to see the typical use cases, how you're actually retrieving data, what you're doing with it. Are you creating an awesome visualization app? Are you crunching some numbers? What happens in your app? The next field that you want to fill out is the quota request. Please do some back-of-the-envelope calculations when you come up with this number. Estimate how much you think you'll really need. Don't just put an extreme upper bound. The thing to note here is that you can always request more if you find that you're running into another quota issue. So if you request something fairly reasonable, your request is likely to be processed a little bit more quickly than if you request 50 million queries per day. In the comments field, if there's anything we really need to know about your app before processing your request, fill it out here. Did you create an app that has a closed beta? How do we go and actually try it out? Is there anything we need to know in order to really process your request fully? Once you submit that, it will come to us, we'll process it, and get back to you in fairly short order. So with that, you're actually well on your way to writing your own application. but maybe you want to learn a little bit more. One URL that's very important for you to know about is the developers.google.com/plus. This is your one-stop shop for everything related to the Google Plus platform. You can see we actually have a section for that +1 button here, as well as for the Hangouts API. For this particular session, you can scroll down to the public data API, and here you see the public endpoints that we have. So let's take a look at the activity search, the one that powered our demo. You can see just a simple explanation of the method, as well as a sample HTTP request, and any parameters that you're able to specify. In this case, we used the max results as well as the order by and the query itself. We also give you a specification of what you can expect in that JSON response. Now, a really cool part of our documentation, and this really allows you to get up and running quickly with the Google Plus API, is the code snippets. And this is really cool. So maybe I just want to get my proof of concept running. I'm going to scroll down into the example section and pick my language. Now, I really like to program in Ruby, so I'm going to pick Ruby. Instantly, I can see an example on how to call this, and I can cut, paste, and get going in an instant. You can see here that it shows you exactly how to execute the query and parse the response. But there's more. We actually have an APIs Explorer that allows you to try it directly in the browser. So here, I can specify my query via the user interface. I'm going to take 5 results. I want the 5 best results. And I'm still going to use the GDD 11JP hashtag. I'm actually going to make that a hashtag right there. If I hit execute, it tells me that my parameter was encoded. That's great. And I see the request that it actually made. So if you wanted to, you could cut and paste this and put it in your own browser, of course, replacing this with your own API key. If we scroll down just a little bit more, we can see the response that was returned. And hey, we've got somebody who got to play with the .NET client library for the Google Plus API. It seems fun. That's great. We like to hear that. So this is really a way that you can get up and running with basically no overhead. So scrolling up just a little bit, you can see some of the other resources that we have. And I want to draw your attention to this download section. And hey, here's that .NET client library. So if you wanted to download it, it's right here. You can go ahead. So this takes care of a lot of the authentication, as we had mentioned before. And you can see that we have many a client library. Pretty much whatever language you want, you can download one right here. Also, we have these starter projects for the Google Plus API itself. So you can see a basic hello world in a variety of languages. For Java, you can see there's actually a few starter projects, including App Engine and Android. So if you're a mobile developer, this will be very handy. For Ruby, it's a Sinatra app. I've done this one, and it's incredibly simple. Also here are the discussion forums. So if you do run into issues, please let us know. We love to hear any and all feedback that you may have for us. So let's switch back to the presentation. And can go on to next steps. So, what's next for you as somebody who is going to develop on top of the Google Plus API? Well, you're going to go and read those developer docs. Try out the APIs Explorer. And that APIs Explorer works across multiple APIs. Actually, go ahead and make your project at the APIs console. Get your developer key, maybe create that OAuth client ID. Download that client library. And of course, extract the starter project. And change the world. You guys have the chance to create something extraordinarily innovative. This is your chance to create the next big app on top of the Google Plus API. We hope you get started soon. Thank you.
So we have our office hours just outside near those yellow chairs, and we have +1 button pins that we have to leave in Japan. So please come talk to us and collect one of those. Thank you so much.
以上でセッションを終了させていただきます。